Welcome back. So today marks World Radio Day and is dedicated to the theme of radio and climate change. Quite interesting. It comes as broadcasters grapple with the need for increased coverage on environmental disasters. World Radio Day was proclaimed back in 2011 by UNESCO member states and adopted by the United Nations General Assembly the following year. Radio broadcasters say the medium is critical in the face of climate change through the dissemination of fact-based information, listeners' voices, and dedicated radio shows. Let's unpack all of this now. Bring in Loyiso Bala. He's the SABC business manager for the Eastern Cape Radio Combo and joins us now via our video link and many, many other things. But Loyiso, we're speaking to you with this cap on. Welcome to the SABC. Great to see you.
Thank you so much, Ayanda, and happy World Radio Day to all the radio stations and obviously all the listeners out there.
A country like ours features so many people's lives who've been characterized by this medium. And it's really been amazing watching the extent to which radio has changed and the extent to which it simply hasn't. Given the role that you're playing, I mean, what are some of your own reflections about the power of this medium, even in just shaping today's society?
Well, radio, especially at a PBS level, public service level, it's both a mirror and a leader of the society that it serves. I mean, it reflects, the realities of our communities, it guides conversations, and it tries in its best way possible to bring solutions to these societal issues. And so I am responsible for the Eastern Cape Combo, which are two radio stations based in the Eastern Cape. Although Mhlobo Wenene, which is the one station, it's a national radio station, and True FM is it's a regional radio station. But we play a vital role in informing, in educating, and making sure that we unite communities by providing credible news in all our programs. That our discussions are really engaging and, of course, culturally relevant. And so, through our diverse programming, we address these pressing societal issues. We make sure that we celebrate local achievements and that we amplify the voices that may otherwise go unheard. Once again, that is the power of PBS radio, because it doesn't only just look at the most popular group, but it really represents all the groups within that society. But otherwise, our platforms, they foster a sense of belonging. They ensure that our communities across South Africa, they feel seen, they feel heard, and in every way they feel empowered.
Yeah, speaking about that sense of belonging, I found that unlike many other mediums, maybe even TV, when it comes to radio, people kind of have an ownership feeling towards the platform. Umhlobo, for example, people feel like it's their own radio station. And that, I suppose, in some instances is great. I mean, it's lovely for the listenership, but I imagine can also bring a lot of complexities when it comes to, filtering out what to prioritize and when.
Absolutely. I know that, my GE, she was on the radio earlier on, on TV earlier on today. And she spoke about, the fact that with so much information being out there, obviously through digital means, that what we stand on, and I believe what makes radio relevant, as you rightly said, number one is because people feel a sense of ownership. A lot of our listeners, they feel like they're with us in the, in the studio. And so when we speak about accountability, and of course, accountabilities to our bosses and so on, but accountability is always to the listeners, because radio has always, just been a powerful tool for number one, information dissemination. As you can imagine, our audiences, they sit both in the rural, actually equally in the rural, in the urban areas, also the peri areas as well, and some of them, they are only means of being connected to the rest of the world. And what's happening, for instance, today, the focus being on climate change is on the radio. So if we're not doing our job properly, if the news that we are giving and the information that we are giving is not credible, we can cause a lot of damage. So there's a huge what you call it again, there's a huge responsibility for us to make sure that everything that we do is absolutely credible and that it is true.
Yeah, I found that, as people grow, they always talk about the good old days. And this is not just in radio, but in all walks of life. I'm sure you've come across some of the, let's call them skeptics among us, who feel that we've kind of varied from having purists on radio, people who perhaps went and studied radio and know radio in and out, and are prioritizing voices that are more popular in places like social media. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, is that something, for example, that you are keeping a close eye on?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, all of us don't want to always come across purists, because we want to make sure that the content that we disseminate through our platforms, and I've got to say platforms because yes, radio lives on a traditional platform, but information can be all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to think of us not only just as a radio station, but also as content creators. But in that, I appreciate purists. They're part of our society, and if you look at the loyalty that we have in our audiences, it's mostly people who've been with the stations, and have been listening to these stations since they were small. As a matter of fact, for a station like Umhlobo Wenene, 35 of our audiences only listen to the radio station, and you know that in these times, many people who consume media, they bounce between platforms, they bounce between radio stations, because in this day and age everything is available. So we are very grateful, and we make sure that we serve those audiences, to make sure that especially these two stations focusing on isiXhosa, what at least Probonen 100% and True FM 50%, we've got to make sure that we serve that market.
Sure. Let's speak about the theme. I think it'd be remiss of us not to touch on that a bit more. I know you alluded to it earlier on, but it's around climate change. And given the fact that you have Eastern Cape-based platforms, so to speak, I imagine this is something incredibly important, even for your community by and large. How is, Umhlobo, for example, interacting with a theme like this? And I ask the question because you also don't broadcast predominantly in English, and there's sometimes a feeling that these concepts are so difficult to explain in our mother tongues, including isiXhosa.
No, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, radio, it's probably about the only tool and a very powerful tool, because all information that we get, we need to make sure that information is disseminated. And so when it comes to climate change, that is one of the things that people need to know about, in the same way that we demonstrated this during the COVID-19 pandemic. When there's any news that are national issues of national importance, we've got to make sure that those news go out to everyone. And so the Eastern Cape Combo, we're really committed to using all our platforms to raise awareness about climate change, since this is the focus for today's Radio Day, and also, in its effect on communities and also sustainable solutions. So we've actually got dedicated programming, we've got expert interviews, so we have environmental experts, we've got policymakers, we've got community leaders who are going to be sharing, with our listeners about climate change. And once again, maybe just to my point of where our listeners sit, I mentioned that, a lot of our listeners, about 50% of them, are in rural areas. And so you can imagine, especially to food security, a lot of these guys, they farm their own food. And so they need this information to kind of know maybe if there's anything in the strategy they've got to change in order to make sure that, their areas are sustainable, and that the work that they are doing for their families is also sustainable. And we obviously make sure that we speak in the language that they do understand. And so, yeah, I think once again that speaks to the power of what it is that we do and the importance of why we do what we do.
Yeah, we can't speak World Radio Day without somehow reflecting on your best radio memory. And it can be from any time, Loyiso. I'm sure you've consumed a lot of radio in your life. I know you've been on radio many times in your career.
Yes, sir.
Anything that stands out for you today?
The one thing that stands out for me, and it actually kind of came very quickly to my head, last year as Umhlobo Wenene FM, we actually found out that isiXhosa is one of the official languages in Zimbabwe. And so we got hold of it's like Ilali, rural areas where Xhosa people are there. They live, like according to our culture. And of course they would, because they're Xhosa. And we went to go visit them so that we could take those news and then share them with our audiences. And so we took, our breakfast team, it's called the BEE, breakfast, ekuseni, to that side. And we didn't actually really know just what a great impact this would have, obviously, in bringing the two countries together, because obviously our audiences began to see that actually, those are not foreigners, but Africa, we actually all are one people. The only thing that divides us is the borders. And so it's, it's crazy how a radio station that was going over there to understand these Xhosa people who have, some of them, probably 50% of them have never been to South Africa, sort of live it out. The culture, the way they live out the Xhosa culture there, sometimes it's much better than how we're doing it in the Eastern Cape. And so it was really just a wonderful way of bridging that gap, between us and our neighboring countries. And it's something that we hope to do, obviously this year and in the years to come. So that's the power of radio. When we say that it brings people together, that's a clear example of how this can happen.
Yeah, amazing how it can also expand people's worlds. Loyiso Bala, lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much. And once again, happy World Radio Day. Loyiso Bala is the SABC Business Manager for the Eastern Cape Radio Combo. Once again, thanks very much indeed.